This is your back bed to the right of your patio. One of the things that really persists about your property is that your irrigation is applied very unevenly. You see in here, moles follow a very careful pattern, a very specific pattern parallel to your property or to your grass line. And this is also the exact pattern that your irrigation takes as it goes in there. Moles throughout your property are being strongly attracted to the more moist part of your property, meaning that this area that your irrigation is watering is the area of interest. Your irrigation misses entirely that, or mostly that area over there, and the moles have very little interest in that area. In the very back portion, you have this area right here in this bed, and then just to the right of that bed. It gets no irrigation, and it's really an attractive place. It may not be very important to you, but that's an area that, because it gets no irrigation, is likely to remain somewhat susceptible. What we see in the backyard is an enormous number of brown patches. Now, these aren't entirely ignored. This head is getting a little bit of a drizzle on this, but the nature of the irrigation of your property is that, for instance, these green areas get hit 3, 4, 5 times by the volume of water that this one's putting on this one, where this area only gets one head that is paying attention to it. Now, it can be misleading for an irrigation specialist thinking that this is getting covered, but clearly where you see the brown patches surrounded by green patches, the green is because of an enormous amount of redundancy with your head settings. When you have your water just being dispersed to about 20–30% of its radius, you're going to be reliant on these green next to brown. What happens, in my interest in this, is that to protect against these browner spots, it's your natural inclination to run it longer and more often. In these wetter areas where you're having the infestation, that's creating a problem for you. So my interest, again, with your adjusting these down, even though this isn't a problem area for you, you're going to have evenly applied water throughout this area, allowing you to adjust your watering patterns. And with those adjusted watering patterns, along with balancing out those wetter areas, so that's evenly applied as well, you'll be able to apply the right amount of moisture, the right frequency, and have better grass as a result, and have more naturally resistant soil. You can see the head that's back here in the back right-hand portion of your yard is set to a stream. Rather than having this head watering all this area in between the head and its landing zone, 90% of its water is going to about 10–20% of the area. What it's leading to is having most of this happen throughout your property. What's happening is that you're getting brown patches around green patches. This is a clear indication that your irrigation set to water just these areas and these areas and these areas, but when it's set so finely, it misses a lot of the browner patches that you see in the yard. This imbalance of moisture really contributes to too wet of soil being next to too dry of soil, and these conditions are the most prime for mole infestation. Adjusting these down so that you're getting about as much water there in a mist than you are at the end of the zone is as much of an even application, so that this head isn't trying to water some other head's zone. When you have this head trying to water the zone of that head, you have 10 or 20% of the water there, 10 or 20% of the water coming into this area, leaving about 80 to 60% of the zone less dry than the other well-watered portions. This is consistent throughout your yard and really the main contributor to your infestation. So once again, the area that is over here, that is also served by a head there and a head here, they're both set to such a stream that you're missing most of that heated brick area along the rim there, which is contributing to, well, an imbalance of moisture applied. This head is also set to a stream. What it's also doing is it's hitting that branch, which might be pruned down a little bit, to prevent a drip line there and areas that are heavily infested in there from having an uneven application of moisture. Again, there's very wet soil here from this drip line, And then over beyond there, you have a very dry section. Very wet next to very dry is everything that a mole ever wants to eat, and it is primed for infestation in an infested neighborhood. That's the kind of evenness that you're going to want to have, having this head water this area as much as that area down there. You're going to do away with a lot of the browning. You're going to probably have to water less because you're having less browning, and you're going to be distributing the water evenly throughout the property, giving you that kind of moisture balance that you're really looking for to be able to curb the mole's allure to the property. I'm back in the ivy bed, and this area is always an area that's infested on your property, and the soil kind of tells the story. You have over here a very mossy area, which means that it gets wet and it stays wet. You also have ground cover, which limits the amount of respiration that it can really have, and it's shaded, which also limits the amount of respiration. And then next to it, you have areas that tend to be exposed. The watering in this area are fed by pop-up horizontal sprayers. What these do is these actually tend to project most of the water and fan it out to about here, having a lot of water in some areas, typically the areas that are most infested, and then drier in other areas. Now you do have some erosion that will wash this, some runoff that will wash this back down into these more ignored areas, but generally it's a bit imbalanced. It's also several different types of climates in here, which means that it's really ripe for infestation and is likely to be the biggest challenge on the property to have success, simply because the infestation in here is caused by improper moisture control. My suggestion is try to balance it out. Work with your irrigation guy to figure out how it is that you can have a more evenly applied area, while considering the difference in respiration throughout the area reliant on all of these factors. This area, pretty similar. It's very shaded and also has the horizontal sprayers, which means that the areas right here are largely ignored, but the area right there is fed. Same thing over here. You can see that this head under here is mostly ignored. You can stick your hand right under there and it stays almost completely dry, whereas this area is being fed by that one and that one. The drop zone is right there. They're both hitting it. So this is by far the wetter area, that by far the drier area. As we've talked about, moisture control, having wet or areas really wet right next to areas relatively drier is a recipe for infestation. Having a bed is the kind of soil that moles also gravitate to. That's why this area is so bad. Try to even out the moisture and allow some respiration in here, a little bit of surface drying while maintaining a water table. Okay, front right beds. You can see the areas that are dry over here and wet over here. These are the areas that are hit by irrigation and not hit by irrigation. The areas that are hit by irrigation are swamped with moles. There's a fine line between the wet and dry, and a fine line between the infested area and the areas of no interest of the moles. Now you have to irrigate over here, that's clear, but you're going to want to do it in an evenly applied area and leaning more towards this kind of soil content status rather than this being so moist. As you can also see over here, hopefully that balances out, these are the dead areas of your grass. This is the stream, the irrigation pattern of the head that's supposed to be watering this area. What it's doing, as was common with the rest of your property, is it's trying to water the zone of that head, and that head's trying to water the zone of this head. What they're doing is they're missing about 80% of their radius, causing these brown spots. That one is watering your street and your driveway instead of filling in the holes that this is supposed to be filling in. So most of the irrigation throughout your property is improperly adjusted. You'll probably find that that's the reason we're not too popular with irrigation companies, because every client that we have that has an in-ground irrigation system has it set pretty much to this, which keeps us in business but doesn't do you any good. My suggestion is to either go on page 4 of our website on a YouTube 2-minute tutorial on how to adjust this yourself, or have your irrigation guy come out here and watch him as he does it, so that he's setting it so that these are at a mist setting, covering about that much of its radius instead of about that much of its radius. Doing that can help you even out the moisture of your soil, giving it proper moisture control, and give you better grass, but it will also give you less dry next to wet areas, which are very, very susceptible to infestation. It'll also probably make it so that you don't have to water as much, being able to help you manage the moisture level of your soil even better.